Okay, this is more of a proof of concept, another video of the two-stick fireboard friction fire method. So we'll give it a go. Alright, what I'm going to try this video is, this is a couple of sticks put together. I'm going to use as the fireboard. It's just some yucca leaves that I'm using to hold it together. And what I'm going to do is see if I can use just this little gap right here, I guess, to kind of serve as the notch, I guess, for collecting the dust. So, and then here's the spindle, and I'm actually going to use just a couple of other sticks and pieces and whatnot to kind of bridge the fireboard so it'll actually be up off the platform just slightly to give it some air. So what I'm going to also have here is this is I think it's an old shoelace that I had on one of my business shoes. So I've still been using this quite a bit. So, and I've got a little toggle here that I use to actually hold the string. So, and I don't really have anything fancy on the end of the bow. It's actually looped up here. So I just doubled up the string and twisted it, and then just kind of looped it, and then just kind of hook it up on the end of the bow here. I got this little fork up here. It's twisted, so I'll use this, and then I just use my fingers here to hold the toggle. So one on each side of the bow, and then as I wrap the spindle around like this, and because it's a shoelace as opposed to like paracord or bank line, I'll actually wrap it twice just to get a little added grip around the spindle. So, and also, if you can tell, I don't have it tied onto the bow on both ends. Just I actually hold one end with my hand or my fingers, and then the other end is tied to the other end of the bow. And the main reason is because when you're working with less than ideal cordage, such as a shoelace, it doesn't handle the abrasion quite as well as if you were using paracord or bank line. So you want to be extra careful, and one way of doing that is to at least be able to hold it on, at least with one end, so you can actually feel or sense the tension around the spindle, so that you know that the bowstring isn't going to slip around the spindle or slippage. So you want to avoid that, because the slippage is what actually causes the bowstring to snap. So if you can feel for that before it snaps, then you can make adjustments and then hopefully work it out. So anyway, we're going to go with that, and this is my bearing block here. Just got some green vegetation tucked up onto the top, and we'll give this a go. Okay, what I'm going to attempt to do is try to get an ember to form between this gap right here. So what I've done is I've laid out a couple of just some broken up sticks to kind of lay as spacers, basically, to get the fireboard up off the platform. So I actually got a little air pocket or air gap underneath. And then what I'll do is actually plan to aim the spindle pretty much on top of one of these spacers, so even if I end up bottoming out, I at least can start, continue to drill at least into the spacer if I need to, if I'm on the edge of getting a coal and don't want to stop. And then what I'll do is actually use another chunk of wood here just to step on, so that because the problem with trying to use a two-stick fireboard method, especially if you're trying to do it without using too much of a knife or cutting edge, is as you start to spin the spindle, it's going to just trace all along this gap here. So what you want to do is to brace it somehow to at least start a divot, basically, so that once I put my foot down and hold this stick and get a divot going, then I can actually go for the coal. And of course, like where the spindle is and then where this gap is, so I'm going to hold it here, yeah, so we can get the light that there'll be enough of a gap to where the dust will fall. And of course, with probably a good 1/4 inch of an air pocket just underneath, will allow air to get access to the dust pile. And that's usually the problem with if you just did the 2-stick fireboard with just, with no very little gap, and you try to get the spindle, is that the dust will form just on the top here in between the gap, but it doesn't form well enough to where you can get good heat, and air or oxygen to be able to get in to the dust pile in order to combust basically and burst into an ember. So that's usually the problem. Not only that, but when you do the 2-stick fireboard method with no space basically in the gap, is dust will form on both sides of the spindle, which means now you're working almost twice as hard because now you're having to try to get heat to circulate through both dust piles in order to get it to a high enough temperature to where it'll combust. Where at least with this concept that I'm trying here, where I've actually purposely put it, allowed a gap to be put in place, and with this spacer in the way, is I'm purposely going to try to push as much of the dust on one side of the spindle as possible to try to channel most of the heat into this dust pile. And then of course once the dust pile drops down and underneath here, that some air will be able to get to it, and then hopefully we get an ember. So we'll see how it goes. Okay, first attempt didn't go too well. Apparently my yucca cordage just pretty much just decided to come loose. So I'm using some old natural cordage that I weaved up, I don't know how many years ago probably. So some queen palm. But anyway, here's what I have. So you can see where I've got like a divot started right there. So see if this cordage might work out a little better. So I was trying to stay all natural if I could. See what we got. Fold. Okay, that attempt didn't go too well, but I did leave the dust there. So with a couple of adjustments here, we'll give it another go. Starting to get deep. Once the divot, the fire hole gets too deep and the spindle starts to bind. Let's try opening the hole a little bit. Give it another try. Okay, I think this is what, my third attempt. So I got my pile of dust there and I can't really tell. So it's not smoking. I think I'm probably like 80% there. So what I'll do is some more adjustments. See if we can get it to go. So I'm going to leave the dust there just because it's already charred and dried. Alright, I think it's like the fourth attempt, something like that. Just binding. Yep. Drilled all the way through. So no success with the first divot. Okay, that attempt didn't work out. So what I do have here though is a nice little hole here, or divot. So what I'm thinking on doing this time around for the next attempt is to just drill next to it, and then this will kind of be my new pseudo notch. So we'll see how that works. Okay, fifth attempt with a second divot. Okay, looks like we got it this time. Well, I had to earn it this time. Wow. Bring the camera over. So we can see the smoke. See where it's coming from here. Oh, it is in there. Oh, still inside the fireboard. Ah, there we go. Alright, this is what we got here for the 2-stick fireboard after 6 or 7 attempts, something like that. But guess be mindful that I wasn't using a metal bearing block or man-made bearing block of some sort. And also the same with the shoestring. So this is just a cheap old shoelace that gosh, I don't know how many fires or embers I've gotten with this thing. And believe it or not, there's a couple more sets I was working with earlier. So I was experimenting with a couple other sets. Let's see, here's one. This is where the yucca actually held in place. So this is a skinnier set, and I actually had better luck with the smaller sets. And now I'm kind of realizing when you've got a spindle that's about as big as your thumb, so probably like 5/8 of an inch or so in diameter, and it's slightly crooked too. And then this set I didn't have too much trouble with either, and I ran into the same thing where I actually would fail on the first attempt and then actually use that failure as a notch to actually just make another hole next to it, and then what do they call it, a 2-hole fireboard ember. So I guess it could be a 2-stick 2-hole fireboard. So anyway, so that's one set here. This is the second set. And of course, when you try to demonstrate it, it looks more difficult than, of course, when I tried it earlier. But I did use wood. This, I don't even know what kind of wood this is. I just kind of grabbed it from out my backyard. Anytime I notice some interesting wood, I'll pick it up wherever I go and then bring it home and then actually leave it out in the backyard to try to be more realistic. I did heat this up ahead of time, so I'll be honest on that, so it is dry. But at least going with the concept of, instead of trying to form the ember right in the gap or the crevice or whatever right here, that you actually need a place to where the ember can get some air or oxygen. So at least this was the idea of at least kind of creating these spacers or shims to be able to set the fireboard on, to get it slightly up off the ground or platform or whatever you have, so that some air can get to the dust pile as it forms. So interesting. This eventual success might not have been the easiest or all in one attempt, but I don't know, within an hour or so. So this is doable if for some reason you had to be outside or whatever. And I guess in my earlier attempts I did use a rollerblade wheel, so that did make it easier. So that was probably a big factor there. So, all right, another video. See ya.